It happened at precisely 8:43 a.m. on a Wednesday, in the middle of Gate C-14's routine chaos. Families were hustling to make connections, businessmen scrolled their phones, and the intercom buzzed with final boarding calls. No one paid much attention to the black German shepherd trotting beside his handler. That was until he stopped dead in his tracks, then lunged toward an unattended suitcase and started barking like hell had opened beneath the tile. Passengers shrieked and scattered. A man dropped his coffee. A toddler began to cry. But the dog, ears pinned back, eyes locked on the navy blue suitcase, refused to let up. One paw slammed into it, then another, then a low, guttural growl that chilled the blood of everyone nearby. Officer Rachel Moore, Duke's handler and a 12-year veteran of the TSA K-9 unit, knew that sound. It wasn't drugs. It wasn't fireworks. This bark meant something else. Something alive. Something dangerous. Or maybe something in danger. "Back everyone up!" she shouted, yanking Duke a few feet away, but keeping his nose pointed directly at the suitcase. "This isn't normal." Security responded fast. Within 90 seconds, a bomb technician in thick padding was inspecting the bag. They cleared a 20-foot perimeter, shut down 2 gates, and pulled the manifests for all nearby flights. But Rachel kept her eyes on Duke. He didn't look afraid, he looked furious. When the technician gave the all-clear on explosives, murmurs broke out. Passengers began filming. Someone even joked, "What, is there a baby in there?" They weren't wrong. The suitcase was unzipped slowly, deliberately, expecting contraband or a dead animal or something far worse. Instead, a soft whimper filled the space, so quiet it was almost mist. Then came the rustle of fabric, and then a little hand. No one moved for a second. Then a paramedic dropped to their knees and reached inside. It was a child. A baby girl, no older than 2. Pale, sweating, shaking, but alive. Officer Rachel instinctively stepped forward, crouching beside the medic as they gently lifted the girl out. She was dressed in mismatched pajamas, her hair matted down with sweat. A pacifier hung from a ribbon pinned to her collar. In her arms, a worn-out stuffed rabbit. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones lowered. Silence fell. Rachel looked into the girl's wide, terrified eyes, and something deep in her chest cracked open. She touched her radio. "We have a child. Repeat, a live child. Approximate age 2. No visible guardian. No tags. Call medical and child protective services now." In the emergency response van, the baby, nicknamed Jane Doe for the moment, was wrapped in a soft fleece blanket and offered small sips of Pedialyte. Her breathing steadied. Her eyelids fluttered, exhausted. Rachel didn't leave her side. Something about the girl clung to her. Maybe it was the rabbit. Maybe the confusion in her face. Maybe just the reality that without Duke, this child wouldn't have seen the sunrise. She would have been loaded onto a connecting flight to nowhere, or worse. A sergeant approached, eyes wide. "We can't find any missing persons reports that match her yet. No ID, no luggage tag, no adult claimants, nothing. It's like she was never supposed to exist." Rachel looked at Duke. He sat proudly by her side, tail curled around his paws. He hadn't taken his eyes off the child once. "She was supposed to disappear," Rachel murmured. But he wouldn't let her. If you believe in the work of canine dogs and their power to save lives like little Jane's, take a second and hit subscribe to the Heroes for Animals YouTube channel. These aren't just dogs. They're heroes with 4 legs and a purpose, and their stories deserve to be told. As news outlets caught wind of the event, the footage went viral. German Shepherd saves baby in airport suitcase lit up TV screens across the country. Interviews poured in. People wanted to know who the girl was, who had left her, and how the hell a 2-year-old ended up zipped inside a Samsonite like last season's jacket. But behind the scenes, The investigation was anything but tidy. Security footage showed the suitcase being left beside a trash bin just 15 minutes before Duke's reaction. But the person who left it wore an oversized hoodie, sunglasses, and a medical mask. Gender, race, age, completely obscured. Worse yet, the person walked with deliberate steps, leaving no prints, no dropped items, no traceable signature. It was as if they didn't want the child found, but also didn't want to be guilty of murder. "Why leave her in public at all?" one detective asked aloud. "Why not just—" Rachel answered before anyone else could. "Because someone hoped we wouldn't notice." Back at the hospital, the little girl finally stirred again. She opened her eyes slowly and reached for the nurse's hand. "Do you have a name, sweetheart?" the nurse whispered. "Can you say your name?" The girl blinked and pointed at the bunny in her lap. "Baby," she mumbled. Rachel stood by the glass, watching. Her mind raced. That moment played over and over in her head. The way Duke had growled, the weight of the zipper opening, the horror that unfolded in seconds. What kind of person could do that to a child? What did they expect to happen? But there was something else, a detail that stuck like a thorn. The suitcase had been untagged, sure. No fingerprints, okay. But Duke had acted like he knew more. Like this scent wasn't unfamiliar. Like this wasn't just some random crime. Rachel leaned down and ran her fingers through Duke's fur. "We're not done yet, are we, boy?" He let out a soft huff and rested his chin on her boot. Later that evening, a nurse came rushing down the hall holding a tablet. "We might have a match," she gasped. On the screen was a grainy image, taken from a missing children's flyer 6 months old. A smiling baby girl with the same eyes, the same curly brown hair. Name, Lily Granger. Age at disappearance, 19 months. Last seen in Albany, New York. No known sightings since. The file had nearly been closed. The parents had divorced. The case had gone cold. But now, Rachel's heart beat faster. She looked at Duke again. "Good boy," she whispered. "You didn't just save her life. You might have saved her name." Emily Granger had just finished pouring her second cup of coffee when she heard the news. The morning sun filtered lazily through her kitchen window in Syracuse, New York. The TV was on in the background, some filler piece about airport delays and security protocols. Her 5-year-old son, Jake, was already up, sitting cross-legged in front of his cereal bowl, humming to himself. Then she heard the words, "A TSA K9 dog discovered a living toddler stuffed inside a suitcase at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport." Emily's hand froze in midair. She turned toward the screen, expecting some bizarre hoax or grim joke. But then she saw the footage. The dog, the suitcase, the little girl. She dropped the coffee mug. It shattered on the floor, but she barely noticed. Because the child on the screen, the one with tangled curls, holding a worn-out stuffed bunny, looked exactly like Lily. Her Lily, the daughter she hadn't seen in over 6 months. It had been the longest half-year of Emily's life. Lily had disappeared during what was supposed to be a routine weekend with her father, Matthew. The custody agreement had been in place for nearly a year, and Emily had tried her best to stay civil. But that particular Friday night, Matthew claimed he'd dropped Lily off at his sister's house, who was supposed to watch her overnight while he worked a late shift. The next morning, Lily was gone. No signs of forced entry. No ransom call. No traffic camera footage. Nothing. The investigation stalled after 2 months. Matthew lawyered up and stopped cooperating. His sister insisted she had no idea Lily was ever dropped off. Everyone had a different story. Emily was left alone with a bedroom that still smelled like baby powder and lavender shampoo. Now, 6 months later, there was a child on the TV. Alive, breathing, holding BB, the same stuffed rabbit Emily had sewn the button eyes back onto twice. Her legs gave out. She hit the floor. Jake came running, confused and scared. "Mommy, what's wrong? Who is that baby?" Emily's voice cracked. "That's your sister." She called the police immediately. Then CPS. Then anyone who would listen. She was transferred between departments until someone in Texas finally confirmed a child was found. But they wouldn't release the name. "We have strict identification protocols," the woman on the phone said carefully. "We're waiting on DNA. I'll fly down today," Emily replied. "You don't need to wait." In Dallas, Officer Rachel Moore stood outside the hospital window, watching the girl, now confirmed to be Jane Doe, take slow, uncertain steps across the playroom. Nurses had cleared the space so she wouldn't feel overwhelmed. Every toy she touched, she did so with hesitation, as if unsure whether it was really for her. Duke lay on the floor nearby, off duty but alert, his eyes following her every move. "She still hasn't said much," one nurse whispered, "but she said the word cold last night. Then dark, then lady. That's all." Rachel took note of that. 3 simple words, but enough to hint at trauma, maybe memory, maybe more. A few hours later, Emily arrived. Emily looked exhausted but laser-focused as she approached the glass. The moment her eyes fell on the little girl inside, the air seemed to collapse around her. Her hands shook, and for a brief second she forgot how to breathe. "That's her," she whispered. "That's Lily." Rachel stepped beside her. "You sure? It's been months. Her hair's grown. She's underweight." Emily didn't blink. "I'm sure. Look at the scar on her left eyebrow. She got it last year at a playground." Rachel nodded slowly. "We're still waiting on DNA, but we believe you." The moment they allowed Emily into the room was silent and surreal. Lily sat on the edge of a hospital bed, holding Bibi. Emily walked in slowly, crouching so she wouldn't tower over her. "Hi, baby," she said gently. "It's me. It's Mommy." Lily didn't speak. Her lip trembled. Her hands gripped the stuffed rabbit tightly. Then she slowly slid off the bed and walked across the room into her mother's arms. Emily broke. There are no words for that kind of moment. Only sobs and shaking. The sound of a mother finding a piece of her heart she thought she'd lost forever. Rachel turned away, blinking back the sting in her own eyes. Even Duke let out a quiet whine and curled closer to the pair. Later, in a conference room surrounded by detectives and social workers, Emily recounted the nightmare. "I never believed Matt," she said. "His story kept changing. First it was his sister, then it was his girlfriend. Then suddenly he claimed I picked her up early, and that's when things spiraled. He lawyered up, and I couldn't prove anything. Everyone treated me like I was hysterical." "Do you think he's involved in her disappearance?" one agent asked. Emily didn't hesitate. "I think he sold her." The room went quiet. Rachel leaned forward. "Sold?" Emily nodded. "He's always been a mess. Owes money, drinks too much. I think he handed her off to someone for cash. I don't know who, but she didn't vanish on her own." That theory stuck, especially once detectives reviewed airport footage again and compared it with security from other airports across the country. In the past year alone, there had been 3 other cases of suspicious bags abandoned near terminals. All were unclaimed. One contained narcotics. One contained nothing. But the third? An empty car seat. Now that pattern had a face, a girl, and a dog who refused to be ignored. Meanwhile, Lily began to open up. Her words were simple, scattered, but powerful. "Dark room, plastic wall, no food, lady with red nails." When shown a set of photos from airport employee files, she pointed directly at one. A janitorial staffer who worked night shifts, recently fired for a no-call, no-show. Her name was fake, her ID stolen, but Rachel knew they were getting close. Duke had picked up her scent at the terminal, and he could do it again. While federal agents launched a larger task force, Rachel sat with Duke in the hospital hallway, gently brushing his fur. "You knew," she said softly. "You smelled her in that suitcase, and you knew she didn't belong there." Duke licked her hand. "And now," she added, We're gonna find out who put her there. Across town, an anonymous tip came in. A woman matching the janitor's description had been seen boarding a Greyhound bus toward El Paso. Security pulled the footage. She had the same limp, same build, same shoulder bag. In her hands, another suitcase. The Greyhound station in El Paso smelled like diesel, sweat, and vending machine snacks. It was the kind of place where no one looked anyone else in the eye unless they had to. That's why no one paid much attention to the woman with the limp hauling a scuffed-up purple suitcase behind her. But Officer Rachel Moore and Duke weren't there to blend in. Duke's nose was already twitching as they stepped through the automatic doors, tail low and body tense. He wasn't barking, not yet. But Rachel had seen this posture before. He was picking up the scent. Somewhere in this station, the woman responsible for Lily's disappearance, and maybe more, was nearby. The Greyhound footage hadn't given them a name, but facial recognition software had narrowed it down to a woman going by Teresa Collins. Fake identity, no social security number, no tax records. But 2 months ago, she had applied for work at 5 different airports across the Southwest. One of them, Dallas-Fort Worth. She hadn't used fingerprints on the job application. She wore gloves, used burner phones, and traveled light. Except, of course, for the suitcases. Duke suddenly veered left, yanking Rachel toward the corner of the waiting area. A woman sat hunched over a bag of chips and a cheap backpack, hoodie pulled up, face down. Rachel approached slowly. "Ma'am," she said, keeping her voice calm, "mind if I ask you a few questions?" The woman looked up, and for a split second there was recognition. Then panic. She bolted. Rachel didn't hesitate. "Police, stop!" The woman took off through the station, knocking over a rolling suitcase and elbowing past a tourist couple. Rachel sprinted after her, Duke leading the charge, barking now. Deep, warning barks that echoed through the concrete hall. They tackled her just outside the side exit. She thrashed, cursed, clawed at Rachel's arm, but Duke stayed back, barking furiously. They cuffed her on the spot. At the local precinct, the woman refused to give a name. No lawyer, no confession, no reaction when they mentioned Lily Granger. But they had her bag, and inside were children's items, wipes, snacks, 2 small sippy cups, and a pacifier nearly identical to the one found in Lily's suitcase. And the purple suitcase? It had air holes punched under the flap. This wasn't an isolated case. Meanwhile, back in Dallas, Emily sat with Lily in the hospital garden. The toddler was still weak, but her spirit was returning. She pointed at flowers, giggled when a bird landed on the bench beside them, and held tight to Emily's pinky like it was her anchor. Emily didn't let go, even when her phone buzzed. It was a call from Agent Prescott. His voice was grave. "We have reason to believe Lily wasn't the only one." Emily's stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "We found traces of another child, male, approximately 3 years old, at a property tied to the suspect. Clothes, baby formula, even a second suitcase. Is he alive? We don't know yet." Rachel and Duke flew back to Dallas the next morning. The trail was expanding faster than anyone expected. More states were involved, more leads, more children. And Duke? Duke was the key. At the suspect's old rental property in West Texas, the air was thick with desert heat and dust. Inside the abandoned trailer, Duke picked up a scent immediately. He pawed at the corner of the bedroom, scratching at the plywood floor. They ripped it up. Underneath was a crawl space. Inside, another suitcase. Empty. But next to it was a stuffed dinosaur and a pair of tiny shoes. The name Connor was written on the inside of one. A quick check of the National Missing Persons database pulled up a match. Connor Hayes, age 3, vanished from a motel in Flagstaff, Arizona 4 months ago. His parents had been on a road trip, stopping for one night on the outskirts of town. He was gone by morning. No forced entry, no witnesses, just a missing boy and a devastated family. Now his shoes had been found hundreds of miles away. Rachel stood in the center of the trailer, heart heavy. She looked down at Duke, who sat beside the empty suitcase with his head lowered. They were too late for Connor, or maybe just not in time yet. The investigation quickly escalated into a federal task force. Dozens of agents, social workers, and local officers joined in. Rachel was assigned to lead the Field K-9 unit, and Duke became the official scent tracker for what they now believed was a multi-state child trafficking network. They called it Operation Hideaway. From Arizona to Texas, Georgia to Ohio, similar patterns emerged. Suspicious luggage, untraceable IDs, fake custodial handoffs, and isolated children snatched when no one was watching. Most terrifying of all? The woman they'd arrested in El Paso wasn't working alone. She was just one cog in the machine. Meanwhile, Lily was slowly recovering, physically and emotionally. A therapist was assigned. A new bedroom was set up in Emily's home, and every night, before bed, Emily would sit beside her daughter, hold her hand, and whisper, "You're safe now. No one will ever put you in a suitcase again." One night, Lily whispered back, "The lady said there were more." Emily froze. "More what, baby?" "Kids," Lily replied, "in other bags." Emily's heart shattered all over again. In a quiet moment during a stakeout in Flagstaff, Rachel sat in the back of a surveillance van with Duke's head in her lap. "You're not just a K-9, she murmured. "You're a damn miracle." She rubbed behind his ears, thinking of the day in the airport when everything changed. One bark, one suitcase, one life saved. And now, dozens more to rescue. They were close, closer than ever, and they wouldn't stop now. Back in Dallas, the woman finally broke under interrogation. She gave up names, drop-off points, safe houses, even a dark website used to advertise children as deliverables. Her testimony led to arrests in 3 other states within the next 48 hours. But one name stood out among the rest. Someone who wasn't just a part of the network. He was the one financing it. A retired federal contractor living just outside of Atlanta. A man with a clean record, a big house, and no children of his own. He called himself the broker, and he had one final shipment en route, scheduled for pickup in 36 hours. Rachel packed light. Duke was already on the door, tail wagging, harness on. This time, they weren't just trying to save a child. They were trying to take down the monster who thought children belonged in bags. The safe house was hidden deep in the Georgia woods, a white clapboard cabin nestled among pines that whispered when the wind moved through them. If you passed by on the highway, you wouldn't even notice it. Just another aging structure surrounded by rusting cars and satellite dishes pointing at the sky. But the inside was another story. High-speed internet, surveillance monitors, RFID blocking briefcases stacked under the bed. Every wall lined with cheap insulation and soundproof foam. This wasn't a place for living. It was a node in a system, and Duke knew it the second he stepped inside. His hackles rose. He sniffed the air, turned sharply, and made a beeline toward the basement door. "Hold up," Rachel said, hand resting instinctively on her service weapon. Agent Prescott gave her a nod. "We go together." They descended slowly. The wooden steps creaked under their boots. The air turned cooler, damper. At the bottom was a cinder-block room with a generator humming in the corner, and another suitcase. It was bright pink, cartoon characters, stickers, too normal, too clean. Duke sat beside it, silent now, but staring intently. Rachel's chest tightened. "Open it," Prescott ordered, stepping aside for the bomb tech. The latch clicked. The zipper pulled. Inside was a camera. Not a child, not clothes, just a digital camera duct-taped to the lining, blinking red. Recording. Rachel's heart jumped. "It's bait!" And just like that, every screen in the room flickered on. A grainy video appeared. Live feed. A man in his 60s, white beard, polished voice, sitting in an antique chair with a dog curled up beside him. "Officer Moore," he said casually. "I see you found my little gift." Rachel stiffened. "Is that a—" Prescott nodded grimly. "It's him, The broker. The man on the screen leaned forward. I knew you'd bring the dog. He's the only one who's managed to outsmart me so far. Impressive animal. You're finished, Rachel said, stepping closer to the monitor. We've got your whole network. Names, drop points, testimony. The broker smiled. Oh, I don't doubt that. But you're missing one. The last one. Rachel froze. What? The girl, he said. The one from Little Rock. Blonde hair, Elsa backpack. She hasn't arrived yet. He paused for effect. But she's scheduled to be loaded in 2 hours at Hartsfield-Jackson, Gate B29. Should I send flowers? Rachel's fists clenched. Where is she? The screen cut to black. They moved fast. The FBI cleared a private jet. Within 40 minutes, Rachel, Duke, and a task force were wheels up and en route to Atlanta. The briefing on the plane was tense and quiet. The little girl was identified as Samantha Riley, age 4, abducted from a gas station parking lot 2 days earlier while her mother paid for snacks. The only clue was a green van seen on blurry security footage. The van matched one spotted entering a restricted staff gate at the Atlanta airport early that morning. The drop was scheduled to happen in a supply room, staff only, adjacent to Gate B29. They were almost out of time. At the airport, everything looked normal. Passengers moved through security. Suitcases rolled behind parents and teenagers on summer trips. The food court smelled of pretzels and hot dogs. But below the surface, dozens of agents were already in place. Rachel held Duke's harness tightly as they navigated the maintenance corridors, led by scent and instinct. Duke's nose was working overtime, sniffing corners, pausing at intersections, then charging ahead. They passed janitorial closets, storage units, locked hallways. Then he stopped. His body went stiff. Nose pressed to a metal service door. He let out a low, guttural growl. She's in there, Rachel said. Prescott signaled. Go. 2 agents kicked in the door. Inside, the lights flickered on, revealing a man in a reflective vest standing beside a conveyor belt, just about to close the lid on another suitcase. Bright pink. Cartoon characters. Rachel rushed in, weapon drawn. Hands in the air. Step away. The man froze, then turned with an eerie calmness. Too late, he whispered. Rachel fired a warning shot into the ceiling. Now! He dropped to his knees. Duke lunged forward, standing guard between the man and the suitcase. Rachel moved fast, yanked it open. Inside was a little girl, barely conscious, bruised, duct tape over her mouth. But she was alive. Samantha was rushed to the airport's emergency clinic and then medevaced to a children's hospital nearby. Rachel didn't go with her. She stayed with Duke, watching him pace by the suitcase as if still unsure it was really over. The man they arrested was another mule, paid to move cargo through airports, claimed he didn't know what was in the bag, claimed it was just money or drugs. But his phone said otherwise. Messages from TB, schedules, addresses, a voice memo with a chilling line, always double bag, kids make noise. Back at the command center, the pieces were falling into place. 10 children recovered across 5 states, 4 suspects arrested, and 1 man still out there, the broker. Rachel stared at the wall of photos, maps, and string. Every arrow led back to Atlanta. I want to go back to that house, she said. The one in the woods. Prescott raised a brow. Why? Because Duke found something there. Something we missed. They returned that night, just after sundown. Duke ran ahead as soon as the door opened, barking toward the basement again. But this time, he stopped short. He turned to the wall, then started scratching. Rachel stepped forward and knocked. Hollow. They grabbed crowbars, flashlights, pulled the fake paneling from the cinder block. Behind it, a vault. 6 feet tall, steel, no keypad, just a thumbprint scanner. And on the wall beside it, photos. Dozens of them. Children, some smiling, some crying, all posed like portraits. Each photo labeled with a date. Some dates were future ones. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. He wasn't just trafficking them, she whispered. He was cataloging them. They brought in a special team to crack the vault. Inside, they found external hard drives, flash drives, tapes, evidence, horror, proof of every child, every drop, every handler, and most damning of all, a contact list, private buyers, enablers, politicians, executives, people in power. Rachel walked out of the house with Duke at her side, her face pale but steady. "This changes everything," she told Prescott. He nodded grimly. "This doesn't end with arrests." "No," she agreed. "This ends with exposure." Back in Dallas, Emily sat with Lily on the porch swing. The girl was asleep, cradled in her arms, her chest rising and falling softly. Emily stroked her hair. Then her phone buzzed. It was Rachel. "They found more," she said quietly. "And we got her. The next girl, Samantha. She's safe." Emily let out a shaky breath. "Thank God!" Rachel paused. "I think we're just getting started." It started with a single flash drive, just one of the dozens pulled from the steel vault hidden in the Georgia woods. But that first device, plugged into a secure FBI terminal under strict chain of custody protocols, opened the floodgates. Hundreds of folders, thousands of images, documents, videos, his locations, drop schedules, payment logs. Each file bore the same stamp in its metadata, TB. The broker. By the end of the night, the task force realized what they were sitting on wasn't just evidence of a child trafficking operation. It was the roadmap to an entire underground network stretching across the U.S. into Canada, and likely beyond. A digital spiderweb connecting families, airports, delivery services, and money laundering fronts disguised as travel agencies and childcare consultants. The broker hadn't just been playing middleman. He had built an empire. Agent Prescott gathered the team at a federal facility in Washington, D.C. The case had now been escalated to a national emergency. Rachel, still reeling from what they'd uncovered, flew in with Duke. The K-9 sat quietly under the conference table while images scrolled across the screen. "This is bigger than anything we've dealt with before," Prescott said. "There are at least 34 named children whose fates are still unknown, and 61 people, many of them in high-ranking positions, who appear on the buyer's list." Rachel clenched her fists. "What about the children we've found?" she asked. "Are they safe now?" "Most are in medical and psychological care," Prescott said, "but it's going to take time. Months, maybe years." He looked around the room. "And some of them may never fully recover." One photo stopped Rachel cold. It was a still frame of a toddler with golden curls and a terrified expression. Taped to a chair. Blank wall behind her. Eyes wide. In the corner of the image was a timestamp from 5 days ago. Rachel recognized her. "Samantha," she whispered. The broker hadn't just sold her. He had documented the entire process, from intake to transport. It made Rachel's blood boil. "This guy knew exactly what he was doing," she said. "He wasn't desperate. He wasn't impulsive. He was organized, professional." Prescott nodded. "Which is why he's still ahead of us." While the FBI issued sealed indictments for several suspects, Rachel returned to Dallas with Duke. She needed to breathe. She needed to see Emily and Lily. Something about being with them reminded her of why she had joined the K-9 unit in the first place. To protect, to defend the innocent. Duke, as always, was calm but alert. He had been on edge since they left Georgia, his ears twitching at every sound. Rachel suspected he knew the mission wasn't over. And he was right. Emily invited Rachel to dinner. Lily sat at the kitchen table, crayons spread everywhere, drawing stick figures of herself, a dog, and Mommy. "I think that's you," Emily said, smiling at Rachel, "with the badge." Rachel chuckled softly. "I think I've looked worse." But the moment of peace didn't last. Rachel's phone rang. It was Prescott. "We've found something," he said, "and it's disturbing." At a secure server farm in Virginia, the FBI had decrypted another series of drives. This batch contained a series of live streaming schedules, video sessions where children were displayed to anonymous bidders across the dark web. The buyers were given virtual paddles, auction style. It was beyond criminal. It was evil. The data also revealed backup servers, one located in Oregon, another in Mexico, and a third buried behind a password-protected shell corporation in Wyoming. Rachel stared at the screen, stunned. These kids were cataloged like property, she said. No, Prescott said, voice thick with disgust. Worse than property. Disposable assets. Meanwhile, back in El Paso, the woman with the limp, Teresa Collins, if that was even her real name, finally started talking. She agreed to testify in exchange for protective custody. She gave up safe houses, courier systems, and the names of low-level operatives. She even admitted she was scheduled to transport another child before Duke sniffed out Lily. But what she wouldn't give up was the broker's real identity. I never saw his face, she claimed. Only heard his voice through a speaker. He was always watching, always listening. What about payment? Rachel asked during a remote video session. Crypto, she said, always in Monero. He paid well, better than most. And why children? Teresa paused, then said something that made Rachel's stomach churn. Because they don't run the first time. They trust. And that makes them easy. The FBI issued a nationwide BOLO, be on the lookout, for individuals matching the broker's physical description, based on the live stream footage. A forensic artist reconstructed a facial composite. White male, late 60s. Scar along his left temple. Wore glasses. Southern accent. Thin frame. Rachel stared at the image. It looked normal, ordinary, like a retired school teacher, or someone's grandpa. She hated that. She hated how monsters could wear the most human faces. Back in Dallas, Rachel met with a tech specialist who had been digging through the drive's metadata. He leaned in, excited. There's a breadcrumb trail. Rachel raised a brow. What kind? Emails. Not direct ones, but hashed ones used to communicate between handlers. And guess what? One of them accidentally pinged from an unsecured Wi-Fi network in Jacksonville, Florida, at a coffee shop. Rachel's pulse quickened. So we have his location? Better. We know where he logs in. They coordinated with Jacksonville PD and Homeland Security. Laid a trap. Undercover agents replaced the baristas. Security cameras were upgraded, a perimeter was quietly established. And then, on the third day, a man walked in wearing a baseball cap and cargo shorts. He ordered black coffee, no sugar, sat at the corner table, opened his laptop. 30 seconds later, the system flagged his IP address. It was him, the broker. Rachel and Duke were flown in that night. The next morning, she entered the coffee shop with Duke at her side. He didn't bark. He didn't growl. He walked straight to the man's table and sat. The broker looked up slowly, smiled, and said, "Took you long enough." He was arrested without incident. But what came next was anything but smooth. The broker refused to talk. He demanded a lawyer, then claimed he was mentally unfit. Tried to blame everything on rogue elements, claimed the evidence was planted. But the hard drive said otherwise. And when prosecutors showed him a photo of Duke sitting beside Lily in the hospital, his expression faltered. Just for a second. Outside the courthouse, crowds gathered. Protesters, reporters, survivors. The media dubbed it the Suitcase case. Rachel didn't care for the nickname, but she understood the impact. Thanks to Duke's bark, a dark chapter was being dragged into the light, and people were finally paying attention. In the weeks that followed, more arrests were made. More children found. More voices heard. Rachel sat at home one evening, flipping through Duke's training file. His certification, his milestones, his medals. He had no idea he'd become a national hero. He was just happy to have a job and a purpose. Rachel scratched behind his ears. "You did good, buddy," she whispered. "Real good." 6 weeks after the broker's arrest, the courtroom in downtown Jacksonville was packed. Families sat shoulder to shoulder, most of them with tissues clenched in their hands. Survivors, Advocates, journalists, people who had followed every moment of this case, every headline, every breaking news alert, were all there to see the man behind the curtain finally face the consequences. Officer Rachel Moore sat in the front row, her K-9 partner Duke lying quietly at her feet, tail curled around his body. He was wearing his dress harness, black nylon with a brass K-9 service badge, and on his collar, a small silver tag that read, "He found her when no one else could." Duke didn't know the impact he had made. He didn't understand how many children he'd saved, how many families had been pieced back together because of one bark in an airport terminal. He didn't care for the medals or TV segments. He just looked up at Rachel with calm brown eyes, waiting for her next move. And she? She hadn't slept through the night since the first suitcase. The trial lasted only 8 days. The evidence was overwhelming. Over 4 terabytes of trafficking files, more than 60 matched victims, and banking records that linked the broker to transactions all across the country. Video testimony from Teresa Collins. Forensic analysis from the tech team. The chain of handlers who had already pled guilty and pointed fingers straight at him. But what changed everything, what moved the jury beyond doubt, was Lily. Little Lily Granger, now 3 years old, sat in her mother's lap and quietly held up the stuffed bunny she'd been found with. She didn't speak to the courtroom, but she didn't need to. That one moment cracked something open inside every person watching. The judge delivered the sentence that afternoon: life without the possibility of parole. Back in Dallas, Rachel returned to her precinct to applause. Officers lined the hallway as she walked in. The captain gave her a firm handshake and a hug that lingered just a second too long. "You brought something ugly into the light," he said. "That takes guts." Rachel smiled politely but didn't stay for the cake. Instead, she took Duke out for a long walk through the neighborhood. The sun was out. Kids played on front lawns. A little girl waved as they passed, and Duke's tail wagged in return. Normal. It was a word Rachel hadn't felt in a long time. That weekend, the Grangers invited her over for dinner. Emily grilled burgers in the backyard, while Lily helped set the table, carefully placing paper napkins beside each plate. Duke lounged under the patio table like he belonged there, and maybe, in some ways, he did. "I still have nightmares sometimes," Emily admitted, sipping iced tea. "But I wake up and she's here. That's all I care about." Rachel nodded slowly. "You're one of the lucky ones." Emily looked at her. "Because of Duke." Rachel looked down at her partner. "Yeah, because of Duke." The months that followed brought sweeping changes. Congress passed new airport security protocols involving thermal imaging and scent-based tracking. Grants were given to expand the TSA's K-9 units nationwide. Rachel was invited to Washington to speak at a Senate hearing, something she dreaded but knew was important. At that hearing, she said one thing that stayed with the public. He didn't save her because he was trained to. He saved her because it was wrong, and he knew it. But time, as it does, moved forward. Some survivors went public. Some didn't. Some families healed. Others never would. Rachel kept working. Duke kept sniffing. And then, about a year after that day at Gate C-14, Rachel walked into the vet's office for a routine checkup, and everything changed. "His hips are failing," the vet said gently. "He's been pushing through, but the pain's getting worse. I know it's hard to hear, but it might be time." Rachel's throat closed. "He's still alert," she argued. "Still wants to work." The vet smiled sadly. "I know, but now he deserves rest." A week later, Rachel threw Duke a retirement party at the station. Officers brought treats and toys. Kids from the community came to pet him and pose for photos. There was a banner that read, "Good boy forever." Rachel tried to keep it together, but when she took off his harness one final time and placed it on her desk, she cried like she hadn't since Lily was found. He licked her face. That was Duke's way of saying it's okay. He spent retirement lying in sun patches near the window, snoozing at Rachel's feet during movie nights, and going on slow walks through the park. And every Sunday, they stopped by the Granger's house, where Lily would run outside shouting, "My hero's here!" He always wagged his tail. He always remembered her. One night, after a long, quiet day, Rachel sat beside him on the couch. "You changed the world, you know that?" she whispered. "With your nose, with your bark." He nudged her hand with his nose. "And I don't care what medals they gave me. You were the one who made the call. You were the one who wouldn't let go of that suitcase." She laughed softly, tears in her voice. "You were the one who knew the whole time." Duke laid his head in her lap, sighing, eyes slowly blinking shut. And in that moment, Rachel realized something she hadn't let herself feel. Peace! 1 year later, a statue now stands outside Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. It's not grand, just a bronze sculpture of a German shepherd standing beside a suitcase. At the base is a plaque that reads, "In honor of Canine Duke, whose bark saved a child and broke open a silence we can never afford again." People come from all over to see it. Survivors leave stuffed animals. Flight attendants stop to read the plaque between shifts. Sometimes families pause just to say thank you. And every so often, a little girl with curly brown hair visits and leaves a small toy bunny at its feet. Thank you for following this journey. Stories like Duke's aren't just about the crimes. They're about the courage it takes to stop them. The people and animals who don't look away, who bark when others stay silent. At Heroes for Animals, we believe that every creature has a calling. And sometimes, a dog's nose can lead to humanity's deepest truths. If this story moved you, we invite you to subscribe to the channel and share Duke's story with others. Let his legacy inspire more heroes in fur, in boots, and in every neighborhood around us. And now we want to hear from you. If Duke could speak just one sentence to the world, what do you think he would say? Let us know in the comments. We'll be reading every word.